Welcome to the Plumeca Remexis tutorial series. In this tutorial, we are going to discuss the 3D view. The 3D view is this lower right view and may not be the most important view in the Remexis software, but obviously is the most impressive. Um, this particular rendering is called a colorized surface model rendering that we can see three-dimensionally, that we can rotate around with our mouse, and we can control how this rendering presents itself. Over on the right, under the 3D rendering section, we have a contrast control to change the contrast of the image. We have a brightness control to change the brightness of the image. And we also have a threshold control. Now, thresholding is just a fancy word for telling the software what part of the anatomy we want to see. Basically, by changing the thresholding, we can either increase the amount of material that we're looking at. In this particular case, by increasing this thresholding, or decreasing the thresholding, I should say, we can bring in all the soft tissue around the bone and the teeth. This presents a very cloudy look in the three-dimensional volume. But most likely we're not very interested in the tissue that's around the bone. So then by increasing the thresholding value, we can start peeling that tissue away basically and get down to more of the bone and the teeth. If we continue increasing the threshold values, we'll eventually start removing bone, starting with the softer bone, then the harder bone, and then finally get down to just the hard radio-opaque material. In this case, we're looking at crowns. It could be crowns, gutta percha, amalgams, any of those type of radio-opaque, very dense materials. So what you want to do is adjust the slider to give yourself the view that you want to see with the three-dimensional image that gives you the best balance of bone and teeth with as little tissue information as possible. Now, you can also adjust the transparency of the view. For instance, if we can bring this down and make it very opaque, which solidifies everything. Notice you can see the great detail in the surface texture of the bone. Or if we drag the slider up, we can make it more transparent to where we can actually see stuff from one side to the other. And we can see more of the roots down in here. Again, you want to adjust this to give yourself the best view that you want to see. I prefer, personally, the solidified look. Now we also have very much of the same controls via a histogram tool. Now over on the right, this little mountain range looking icon is our adjust levels, which is nothing more than a histogram. Now a histogram is a graphical representation of the data. And how to interpret this data in a histogram is that down on the right side of the histogram is all the very hard radio-opaque materials. Stuff that has a very high hue value or Hounsfield value. As you move to the left, basically as I refer to coming up the ramp, you get into softer materials, starting with the hardest bone first, then into softer bone, then into tissue, eventually getting up to the edges of the volume area where the tissue edges end. And then once you get over the peak, there's other tissue values, and then eventually get into airspace values. Now here we have several different lines. We have the two red lines, which are basically nothing more than your gamma or contrast value, basically. You can adjust these appropriately to give yourself the view that you wish. The black line here is our threshold values. So, for instance, since down on the right-hand side is the very radio opaque materials, if I were to drag this down on the right side, we get to see, again, just the very hard radio opaque materials such as crowns, gutta perches, and so forth. Then as I bring this way, to the left, we start filling in the information, starting with the hardest material first, and then getting in the softer materials. So you want to adjust the black line to, again, to wherever your comfort level is with the view for what you want to see. Once you're done making your adjustments, you can just click OK. As well as being able to adjust what we're seeing as far as density of material, we also have a color band at the top, and there's a drop-down menu for this color band. This is the default tone of color applied to the 3D volume. However, we can apply any kind of preset color band that we have here. So if we wanted to make a real psychedelic rainbow color, we can. The purpose of this tool, obviously, is just to give a different perspective to what you're looking at anatomically. So by changing the colors, by changing textures, by changing the reflections of the material, something may stand out that the human eye normally probably may not have picked up otherwise. Once we're happy with our selections, just click OK, and we have our 3D view set up the way we want.